Hey guys, it's Tunico Pantua, and I want to share some more tips on how to stay productive, whether it's for your own personal projects or whether it's for a job or someone else. I want to share some more tips that have helped me stay productive for creative work. Now, first of all, I do think that motivation can be a good short-term burst of fuel, but I personally don't find it the most reliable fuel since motivation can be very finicky. But the things I do want to talk about help me stay on track. Second, this video is actually a sequel to a video that I made years ago, how I stay productive. Back then, in that video, I talked about strategies that I use to stay focused and productive on my own work, such as using a timer, like the Pomodoro technique, which is a 25-minute intervals with 5-minute breaks, and a long break after 4 cycles. Another practice that I did a lot is documenting my process. Every time I work, I'm actually screen recording using OBS or Open Broadcast software, which is free by the way, you can download it. And because I'm recording it, I don't really have the space to fool around. But I can also use these recordings for, let's say, monetization research, or YouTube videos like this where you just see me work as I talk about stuff. Another advice I shared is probably streaming it with your friends or public just to really stay productive. Other things that I've shared is preparing a schedule and outline for you to hit those milestones. If you're really feeling ballsy, hold yourself accountable to a deadline. Tell people that you'll finish at a certain date so they'll expect it. So today I want to share some more tips that have actually helped me over time while I've been working on my own creative projects recently. First of all, make sure your organization game is on point. Organization is an art form by itself. Labeling your files in order, figuring out a foldering system, keeping the file naming convention simple, and saving versions in case of backup. I like to version my files based on the date. When something is organized, it just makes quality of life easier. I'm much faster, things are smoother for me, things are easier to track, and stuff is easier to find. You won't spend a lot of time and effort just trying to navigate through disorganized chaos. I can tell you from experience that dealing with a disorganized production not only burned me out, but it made it really hard for me to stay productive. It slowed me down big time. And it just became so overwhelming that I put off the work. Ever since I became more organized, I've been finishing projects much faster. There's been less hiccups with a project. So figure out a system that works best for you. I think one tip that I'd give is that if you're going to give files to someone else that will help you finish some projects, think about how to make their life easier when they're navigating through your files. The next one I want to talk about is utilizing a planner or an app to track tasks. I personally write tasks that need to be done and I turn it into a checklist. Sometimes I'll make a checklist for the day or sometimes I'll make a checklist for the overall week. It allows me to track the tasks that I'm currently working on and what needs to be done. Now, I can still work without a checklist, but having a checklist kind of helps me stay in touch with the progress I'm making. Sometimes I think about all the things I need to do, but I think the thing that does stress me out sometimes is not knowing what those exact things are. The checklist helps ground me. So I go about this in 2 ways. One is that I can just use a simple paper and pencil or notebook and pencil and just write a makeshift list out of it. Sometimes I'll use an app like Notion. Nowadays there's a lot of productivity apps that you can use, such as Notion, Trello. All of these are customizable for whatever task you have at hand. The next one I want to talk about is my favorite, and it's something that I've been working with for the past year, which is to work on steps in bulk. So let's say for animation, I just work on the rough thumbnails before I start storyboarding, and once I'm done with the thumbnails, then I touch on storyboarding. I don't do layout or anything animation related until my storyboards are locked down, and once that's done, I start importing my storyboard panels into animation files. I don't start animation, I just prepare layouts for each shot before I even move on to animation. And it's the same thing once I arrive in animation. I'm probably just gonna figure out all my key poses for every shot before I even start doing breakdowns or before I start actually animating them. I just try and figure out my strong key poses before I start making breakdowns and in-betweens. Now, the reason why I do this is I notice that I get burned out easily when I'm constantly shifting gears. So if I'm constantly jumping back and forth between animation, coloring, cleanup, where it kind of requires me to change to a different mindset for each stage, then I'm just gonna get overwhelmed. I don't move on to the next stage unless everything is done within the previous stage. And this stuff can be applied to, let's say, drawing or illustration. There'll be maybe a session or a time where you're just doing rough sketches and you don't even touch cleanup and coloring until you've gotten a good amount of those rough sketches done. So when you do those cleanups or those final touches, a lot of that creative decision making is already set. I actually made a video about the creative side of a project versus the labor side of the project. The creative side being all the decision making, the planning, how to execute something, whether one choice is better than the other, whereas the labor one is just moving forward and just doing the work. Like in animation, it's just cleanup and in-betweening, and coloring where there's little creative decision being made. And I try to save all the labor stuff at the later stage. But I think the big takeaway is just to do things in bulk at a certain stage first before you move on to another bulk. Now, another reason why I would suggest this is because of unforeseen circumstances. So let's say you're running out of time, or maybe you're running out of budget or energy. You'll have a scope of the overall project, what needs to be prioritized and what can be prioritized less. Another thing that I've been trying recently is keeping a casual work log. And again, it's probably the most casual tip that I can share here, but I want to talk about what I've gained from it, because honestly, it's my favorite in this list. So let's say I don't even want to think about having a deadline or a really strict checklist. I just want to work something on the side, and I'll work on it whenever I have the time to do it. So I made a casual work log where I write the date every time I'm working on something, and once that day is done, I just write down what I got done during that day. Some days I'm super productive and I get a shit ton of work done. Some days I'm not as productive, or I don't really do any work. What this helps me see is a certain median or an average of how much I can do without working super hard but not slacking off at the same time. And also, it's kind of nice to see that I'm making progress because, every day I'm working on something, but I tend to forget how much work I get done. Logging what I did for the day helps me appreciate the work that I do. Something that I'll do is write down the benefits of completing these tasks. Like I'll write down, okay, I can finally move on to this next sequence in a certain storyboard bit. Also, it kind of keeps me motivated to have something filled out for each day. Again, the benefit that I gained from having a work log is consistency and appreciating the work that I actually do, because again, it's easy to forget when you're not tracking that. So these were 4 other tips and advice that I wanted to share that helps me stay productive, and I hope it helps you guys stay productive in your own creative projects or your own personal projects. Now, when I made that first video on how to stay productive a few years ago, I was very gung-ho and intense about just finishing personal projects regardless, but after going through burnout and having sometimes unhealthy relationships with my work, I wanted to think about ways and how I could still be productive and expressive without being overwhelmed and burned out. So these 4 other tips that I wanted to talk about was more about a more ecological approach to things and clearing up noise that would cause major problems later down the line. So I think the tips that I shared in the first video I did on how to stay productive, I think they're still good. But I still want to make stuff for a long time without getting burned out, without getting bored, and without always being so intense about staying productive. This is more of like a chill way to stay productive from my point of view. Anyways, I hope this video helps. Bye.
Interested in learning hand-drawn animation or learning how to finish an animated shot from beginning to end? Have a look at the store where you'll find the complete Introduction to 2D Animation video course, tutorials, and other resources. Learn classical animation approaches, drawing, lectures, techniques, and other process videos. Visit the store through the link in the description below.